Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not Another Nutrition Podcast. I actually listened to the beginning of a podcast the other day, had like a fancy jingle and, a professional one that gets added on the beginning. I thought, do I need one of those? But nah, why bother? Gets boring, right? Repetitive, same thing over and over again. No offense to anyone else who has one. Soz. Just inadvertently insulting you. I hope you're well. This is part 2 of my sugar. Sorry, I'm just rolling up my sleeves. Getting serious. Part 2 of my sugar series. I might even have a part 3, who knows. I want to focus this one really specifically on sugar addiction. Big topic, gets asked loads. When I posted about episode 1, questions started coming in about sugar addiction. The problem is when I think about this, it's interlinked with so many different areas. So then why do people think sugar addiction exists? So spoiler alert, it doesn't. But why do people think it exists? What really does exist? Why do people... And then the subject of cravings comes up. And then the practicalities of the situation are worthy of a discussion. So I don't know how this is going to go. But anyway, I've just written a quote here. I'm just going to read to you because, long story short, you send this to a friend or you send it to someone you have an argument with on the internet, and you can reference this. So it's by Heberbrand et al. 2014. There is currently insufficient scientific evidence to label any common food, ingredient, micronutrient, standard food additive, or combination of ingredients as addictive. Mic drop. Now, 2014. The scientific literature hasn't really changed since then. To argue any difference. Obviously, people will argue. There's always differences of opinion. And, one of the issues is stuff people can pay to publish stuff in journals, but it's not necessarily peer reviewed. You just pay and it goes in. There's different levels of integrity and different levels of, who's worth listening to. There's, been a few BMJ, British Medical Journal, opinion pieces, which have just posted like their studies. Oh, this new study. It's not a study. It's a bunch of low-carb jokers making loads of unfounded claims because they're zealots. Anyway, going back to, I think that was last episode where I talked about Malhotra and Zoe Hark and Tim Noakes, these kind of low-carb crowd that are not very evidence-based. Anyway, the issue hasn't changed. So where to start with this? I think it's probably, let's start on this whole thing of I think it was Dr. Mark Hyman. Oh, sugar is 6 times more addictive than cocaine. Wow, what a ridiculous statement. And lots of the studies, again, not necessarily done in humans, because imagine that, enroll in our study, we're going to give you cocaine. That's not happening. Not, at least not in most, not in this day and age and in Western countries. So I say that because some of these stuff that was done in Russia back in the day, it's really brought science on, but no ethics committee is agreeing to that stuff now. So this idea, because there's brain involvement, your brain lights up when you eat sugar, and pleasure centers are activated. But I've made this analogy before of, those same pleasure centers are lighting up when if you like puppies or babies. And no one's going around going, I'm addicted to babies, I'm addicted to puppies. Again, I know it probably feels like that. Oh my goodness, when I see a cute puppy, I must stroke it or whatever. Dog people, eh? Crazy bunch. But you get it. I'm the same with babies. Super cute, just want to cuddle them. But you're not addicted, and no one's making those claims. But with sugar, because there's a behavioural component, there are some appropriate links Potentially, but this idea of a physiological dependence and addiction, it doesn't exist. Now, for those of you who listen to this who are practitioners, telling a client you're not addicted is not necessarily very helpful. Showing some empathy, some understanding that they feel maybe out of control, but it's then you need to find a way for them to listen and understand and maybe see errors in their thinking and their ways. And one of the interesting points around this is pointing out, as I kind of discussed in episode 1, it's not just sugar. People aren't doing these. So I'm going to use this term, addiction or addictive-like behaviours. People act like addicts, even though they are maybe not addicted to. So the physiological basis for sugar addiction or any food substance addiction does not exist. But the behavioural components, we can draw some links and we can discuss those. And that's where it comes into some of the practicalities. Now, the difference is, and this is jumping ahead, but the difference is when with substance abuse, if someone is addicted to opiates or alcohol or whatever, the very widely agreeable solution is that they abstain from the consumption of that substance. And over time, they get withdrawal symptoms and they get better. And it is one of these things is lots of people describe themselves as in recovery, and kind of for eternity, people who became addicted to those things are maybe more likely to become addicted again. And so abstinence is the way forward. However, with sugar and food in general, so I'm going to talk about sugar addiction, food addiction, and eating addiction as three very different things with three very different levels of plausibility or appropriateness. Another spoiler alert, the one that I am most comfortable with, and I think the scientific literature really needs to catch up with, and then the media can jump on board, and instead of having words like food addiction, sugar addiction being used, we don't talk about that. But having a genuine discussion around eating addiction might be helpful to people. I just realised I need to pick up the babies in 30 minutes. Alexa, set a timer for 25 minutes. There you go. This episode.
Minutes, starting now.
It's very loud. There you go. That's the time limit we've got to chat today. We'll see if it works. So eating addiction as something that's worthy of discussion, worthy of understanding, worthy of you going and doing more reading if you are a practitioner. And for you guys out there who are Gen Pop types who listen to me for education and for self-help purposes, I hope it can help you to get maybe some understanding around this. Even just classing yourself as something, it can have its own pitfalls and downfalls. And so being able to understand your situation. So I talk about this, owning your own set of cards in many, many ways. PCOS, hypothyroidism, everything, propensity to overeat, etc. Owning that set of cards and being able to make appropriate adjustments. And the problem is treating eating addiction, food, the feeling of food addiction, sugar addiction, if you're calling yourself that, is a very, very, very different ball game to talking about other addictions. Now, so let me just start with this. Sugar in and of itself is not addictive. And these pleasure centers being lit up in our brain are much more activated by fat plus sugar. And this idea that sugar is the devil and the low carb crowd and all this other jazz. It's not the case. Processed foods, as again I discussed in last episode, are an issue. And the fact that I am a proponent and encourager of flexible strategies with life, with dieting if you choose to try to lose body fat, means that people will end up consuming some of these processed foods. And I don't know if I said this in last episode, but the ideal scenario is you go and live on a desert island and you start a new life that I feel like I said hippy dippy somewhere. But that there's just no access. This is when we talk about children. You should, I think, do your best initially whilst they are completely in your control, i.e., give or take in your control, i.e., 1 and 2 years old, maybe we can talk about. Don't expose them unnecessarily to loads of processed junk food. They don't know that Haribo exists then, so don't give them it. Don't give them sugary drinks. It's so sad that there are mums and dads out there giving babies bottles with Coca-Cola in them because they don't necessarily know any better. But my pragmatic, and that's what I always try to be, pragmatic in my discussion of the real life scenario we're in. Your children and you will go to environments where you cannot control the food cues, the food that's available. You go to supermarkets, you watch TV, you go to parties. So yes, if you lived a bit of a hermit lifestyle, this, that and the other, you can eat completely ad libitum. You can eat whatever you want because you're eating loads of potatoes and fruits and vegetables and meat and whatever. But in our environment, it's different. And so you can end up, if you're just super restrictive on things, but you can set up your home environment differently so that you're not constantly bombarding yourself with food cues. You go into the kitchen, there's just biscuits on the side all the time. That is a food cue, and it will. This is when we turn back to evolutionary biology. Your body has the ability to remember how foods made you feel. So dopamine is something that we have evolved. This capacity for survival, to thrive. We eat a food, we know that it has calories, and the gut-brain axis is a huge part of that we're learning loads more about now. But it's not just sugar. Fat does the same, and fat and sugar is the cocaine of the food world. This or fat plus sugar plus some salt. Our body likes these tastes, and it has reward mechanisms that encourage us to seek these out. So, and the thing, and the reason I've paused there is because we have this difficult scenario that realistically you create, and the best way to make someone act like a cocaine addict for sugar, for instance, or whatever, junk food, is to restrict them. Okay? It's the opposite of what we want to do with substance addiction. This is super, super, super strong evidence in animal research, but it's backed up by plenty of emerging human evidence. It's not like we have to rely on the animal data anymore, but it's so strong in the animal data, and then we look at in humans. And they're doing the studies. They're literally getting, for instance, a whole bunch of female students, and they are asking them if they basically questionnaires to find out firstly, if these people are restricted eaters, if they find that they are someone who restricts their food intake, they're very over analytical about what they eat, etc., that's partly by the by. It just gives us interesting end results, or it allows us to make more interesting conclusions, because studies report averages, so we might get an average of that whole study, but we're all different as individuals. So if we have some way of stratifying, it's super helpful. So it's because you get these dummy anti-diet doctors who have never really studied nutrition, who maybe they lost weight, or maybe they got an eating disorder, or anyone, nutritionists, dietitians, who got an eating disorder, and they think everyone is like them. Or they were a bad doctor who was encouraging everyone to lose weight, and then they had one instance where a patient ended off worse as a result, because they shouldn't have been doing that. Doctors shouldn't really be talking about nutrition until they've done adequate training in that area. But you just get, and this is the problem, isn't it? People have a go at influencers on Instagram, and yeah, they shouldn't be saying half the stuff they're saying. But then we've got people on TV, doctors on TV, just because they're a doctor talking about nutrition. Why is there a doctor talking about it? What on earth knowledge have they got? Or they read a book, or they got interested, or they ate a bit better. That's not credentials. And this is the problem, is they just are human, and they're imperfect, and they see something and they swing to extremes. I'm forever encouraging people, try not to swing to an extreme because of a personal experience, because your personal experience might be very different from someone else's. And this is what we see in these studies. High restraint eaters end off loads worse. So if someone has got a history of dieting, then we need to treat them as practitioners differently. If you are someone listening to this, I spent my whole tour actually talking about this more and more per talk, and having to cut out more of the other stuff. That if you are someone who has a bad relationship with food, and loads of these questions I got, I made a note of a few of them. I can't see it right there. But, asking how do we get rid of cravings, etc. And I'm trying to think if I wrote anything down, because so there's this study it's got a really cool name. It's something like, let's be merry, drink and be merry and it's based off a quote, because tomorrow we die, or tomorrow we go to war, or something. And they've changed it to, let's drink and be merry because tomorrow we diet. And it's assessing the effect of impending restriction. And you know what? I'll make a note to link you to that study for anyone who's interested. So it's like something about merry, tomorrow we diet. And essentially, in high restraint eaters, people who have history and have a memory and have a relationship with dieting, you tell them that they're coming to do a study, and tomorrow they're starting this restrictive diet plan. And then they go, you need to fill in your participant data and do, I think actually they got them to do like a test. I'm trying to think of what's that thing? Just basically an IQ test type thing, an anagram, whatever, a quiz, right? And they said once you've filled in all your forms and done that, there's a load of cookies and pastries in the next room if you want to just go have them. People who had a history of dieting and were told they were going to go on a diet tomorrow spent statistically significantly less time on their quiz, and then to go and get their cookies, and then ate statistically significantly more processed junk food, cookies, whatever, in the whole diet starts Monday mentality, because of that mentality. People who didn't have this history of restrained eating and dieting didn't react that way. So these high restraint eaters. So again, it gives us this idea of, actually when we work with clients, we need to have these discussions of what they're like, and have they got these tendencies? And And so what do we do? Oh, I feel like I'm addicted to sugar. You're not, okay? You're definitely not. I feel like I'm addicted to food. Again, you're probably not in the strict sense of the word, but maybe you have addictive-like behaviours towards food. And this is what I talked about in my tour. If you are consistently using food to affect your emotions, and not that's, so again, I talk about normal eating. It's normal to eat when you're lonely. It's normal to eat when you're sad, and then it helps you feel better. But if you're consistently going to that, and then there's some guilt and some shame, which again is indicative of these addictive patterns. There's shame, there's all that jazz. Comparing it to alcoholism and all that kind of jazz. But therefore, those are the people I'm discouraging from doing any kind of dieting, and not for perpetuity. What's that word? Forevermore. To eternity. Damn it. And again, some of you are going to be shouting at me. I know. Alexa, what is perpetuity? I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
According to, a perpetuity is an annuity that has no end, or a stream of cash payments that continues
Yeah, like
forever.
perpetual. There you go.
There are
See?
few actual perpetuities
Alexa,
in existence.
stop. There you go. Perpetuity. Yeah, like perpetual non-being able to diet or change your body fat. Cool. But I've had, people who came on my tour, they went away, they got counselling, they, went through a program of improving their relationship with food. Particularly, I'm not really talking about binge eating disorder here. Geez, this is going on a long time, isn't it? I've got so much other stuff to say here. But I'm not saying it has to be in perpetuity. Cool, there you go. New word for everyone. See if you can get it in a sentence this week. I think, and I wouldn't say that people can just never diet again. Because, for instance, this woman, she went away, got counselling. She even said to her, counsellor, I want to diet. She was like, no, you shouldn't. She said, well, I'm going to. I want you to help me. And again, this is what I talk about. You might need to take 10 steps back. Not just one step back to take 2 steps forward. 10 steps back to get yourself healthy again in your mind and your relationship with food. And it might take a long, long time. This is the whole thing. Doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. But we're insane around food. You might need to really heal around food before you can then start taking steps, and do it in the right way with this unconditional permission to eat that I talk about so much. And lots of people put unconditional permission to eat in a different concept. I use that concept in a you can use that concept with the mindset of purposeful fat loss. It's a different way of perceiving a dieting phase, that you don't have to restrict, that it's not a consistent restriction. If I can just get through. When you start to feel those feelings, you reassess, you slow down, you stop. Anyway, off topic, which I'm supposed to be talking about sugar addiction. So, I don't edit these podcasts much, so these long pauses, I'm just sort of regaining my thoughts and where I want to go with it. But I imagine for some people, I imagine lots of you listen to me on 1.5. If you're listening to me on 2x speed, you're an idiot. No offense. I mean, it is offensive, isn't it? You're an idiot. But I don't mean it offensively. I mean it with love. But you're an idiot. You're not taking this in if you're listening to me on 2 speed. I've listened. It doesn't work. You're not taking it in. Oh, I listened to your podcast 3 times. Why did you listen to it 3 times? Because you listened to me on 2x. Stop it. I understand I do talk slow. I'm pensive. I'm considered in my speaking. Stop listening to me on 2x. 2 times speed. 1.5 at the tops. Right. Anyway. So this idea of sugar, I mean, I don't know what more to say. The neurobiological side of things is not there. It's not there for sugar. It's not there for fat. It's not even there for sugar and fat. They are just extremely pleasurable things. And these addictive drugs are basically hijacking centers in your brain that are there for good reason, for our survival. The problem is we now live in a obesogenic environment where we have access, unlimited almost access to food of one degree or another. And yes, access to junk food is cheap and it's easy and it's pleasurable. We're not addicted. And so, as I said, in humans, the easiest way to make someone act in an addictive-like pattern is to restrict them. So they do it in mice. And it's crazy because it's just mental for me, like, just considering how clever science is. And sorry if anyone's like a big PETA fan. Have you heard about PETA? This PETA, I don't even know what it stands for, but it's like the protection, whatever, animals, lobbying, whatever. And lots of stuff they do is good. Like cruelty to animals is horrific. But obviously there's different lines of what people view in their morality, like don't eat animals, basically. Don't use them don't even have cheese because animals are used and whatever. Don't have honey because, it's unfair on the bees. Bee movie. Good film. But now you're not allowed to... oh my goodness, I hate the way the world is going. And it's just a joke, isn't it? Like, even now, I just... loads of things I want to be on board with. It's just full of morons and no one in their own realms. This is me, right? I call out nutritionists. When people go, when I say something about dietitians, all the good dietitians go, not all dietitians, right? What does that remind you of? And I'm like, dietitians are taught based on this book, the Manual of Dietetics. Yeah, but not all dietitians. Anyone heard of the hashtag not all men? Like, it's the same concept. Well, not me. Like, stop, you male, female, whatever. It's just like, let's call out the crap no matter who it is. But if you are a PETA person or a feminist or a dietitian, call out your own kind. Because when I have to do it, I sound like a whatever. Insert expletive. But now PETA is like, you can't call someone if you go, that's sloth-like because it's slow. Or if you go, he's a snake. Apparently animals are getting offended and you're no longer allowed to say that. Yep. It was a real thing. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a hoax, but no. I mean, I say you're no longer allowed to. I just mean people are getting offended about it because apparently it hurts the animal's feelings. This isn't a joke. This actually isn't a joke. Anyway, hashtag not all humans. So, flipping it, where was I? Yeah, animals. Anyway, they basically teach rats, mice, rats particularly, to self-administer cocaine. And it's like, imagine this, imagine being that rat. It's just like, cool, when I stand on this lever, I get like a little hit of cocaine. And it's just like, it's this little party animal. It just becomes really chatty and really obnoxious and whatever. So, anyway, they do that and then they compare it to sugar. Now, the interesting thing is that you only see these addictive-like behaviours in animals. And again, I don't really like animal studies. It's just interesting. There's a lot more in this area in animals than in humans. But we have these studies in humans, like, again, I mentioned that one about bringing them in. And I think I started to describe another study where they got female students. And they did essentially what I'm talking about in this. Let me finish on the mice and I'll go back to that study. Essentially, they give them lots of sugar and they give them diets with, a normal chow. They cook a chow, whatever, low-fat diet, chow, animal feed. And then they have one with a high sugar content and then one with a high fat and a low sugar content. And then a cafeteria diet, they call it. Basically, human junk food. And everyone all the animals get fatter and overeat on the human junk food. We shouldn't be eating a boatload of junk food. It's not good for our health. it's a fine balance. It's difficult, the world that we live in. It's a fine balance between not demonizing stuff, but also just realizing that this junk food doesn't necessarily serve a purpose of good long-term health. But the way that we can make rats crazy around sugar is restrict them. And you basically give them sugar, and then you go, you can't have any sugar, and you take it away. And then you give it back to them, and they binge. And they do these addictive-like behaviours. And it's this issue with restriction. We do the same thing to humans. You take these group of female students, and you tell them you can't have chocolate. And again, it's much more prevalent in these high restraint eaters. They start having these behaviors that are seeking out what you're restricting, and they become addictive-like behaviors. They become crazy around food. So when we talk about cravings, how can I stop cravings? It's tricky because they're natural. To want these foods is normal based on our physiology. But you also have a learned behavior. So again, boredom. Boredom is a big factor that leads to some of these behaviors. And so again, considering that for yourself or your clients. Oh, it's when I'm bored. Right. What can you do behaviorally to change that? You know what? I'm going to talk specifically more about some actual... I'm going to do a practical part 3. So this was sugar addiction. We'll go into part 3, which is like practical advice from me on this. Talk a bit about cravings. And I'll put lots of reference in the show notes, just because people I want to send people this to show them that sugar's not addictive. You know, sugar and fat is way more pleasurable, and it's just a fact. And people, in this instance, it's like, oh, well, sugar intake has gone up over the years. So has fat intake. Added fats and added sugars have both gone up massively. On the, you can get the graphs from the USDA data and stuff like that. I think that's it. Sugar addiction is not a thing. There's no single substance that's doing that. But there are these behaviors that we are maybe enhancing through restriction, which is very different from substance addiction. There you go. Tune in for part 2, and I'll talk about some of the pragmatic stuff around cravings. And... oh, Alexa, stop. There you go. Perfect timing. Around cravings and... some of this 10-step back stuff to then hopefully take 11, 12, 20 steps forward. But you need to commit to that 10 steps back. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, share it around. Love you lots. Until next time, much love.